Hello and welcome to Dialogue. China's stock market roared alive to two-year highs Tuesday after the week-long National Day holiday, thanks to monetary stimulus package, property market support, together with anticipation of strong fiscal policies. But the rally then fizzled due to the lack of details on fiscal measures. So what's in the pipeline to sustain the market optimism? What needs to be done to get the economy back on more solid footing? And what do these stimulus measures mean for the future of China's economy? Join us for discussion today, live from Beijing. I'm Xu Qinduo. Joining me today are Professor Qian Jun, Executive Dean at the International School of Finance at Fudan University, Professor Zhu Ning, Deputy Dean at the Shanghai Advanced Institute of Finance of Shanghai Jiao Tong University, Professor Bert Hofman, former Director at the East Asian Institute of the National University of Singapore, and Michele Geraci, former undersecretary of State at the Ministry of Economic Development of Italy. Welcome to the show. So, Professor Qian Jun, I will start with you. If you look at the recent moves by the Chinese government, we do see policies after policies, with the latest to stimulate this stock market. So, what's your observation? Why, with this round of efforts, are we starting with the stock market?
Things are moving very quickly. We now know that yet another very important news conference will come Saturday morning, where we'll expect to see the Treasury Department, Mr. Lan, to speak. So I think this is a series of stimulus policies. It's just that in practice, we observe the stock market being the first component of the economy to have a very positive reaction. On the other hand, if you look at the real sectors, consumption, household, corporations, we know that only monetary policy is not enough. We do need to see more concrete plans for fiscal policies, because a lot of families, firms, even local governments, they have a lot of debt. We're in this deleveraging cycle, and during this deleveraging cycle, only loose monetary policy, only more credit is not enough. So we do expect to see concrete plans Saturday morning, and hopefully the stock market will continue to rise. Maybe not like going up and going down, but in a gradual process. But also very importantly, we will see hopefully we'll continue to see more improvement in real estate sectors, in consumption, and other sectors.
Mm-hmm. Professor Hofman, looking at the Chinese efforts and the Chinese economy, how do you see the recent moves by the government, of course, to boost the stock market, in the property market area, monetary policy, and then people are expecting more from more of the fiscal policies?
Right, so we have to wait for Saturday, unfortunately, but a lot of policy announcements have been made, and on the ground, gradually those policies fall into place. The monetary side has been very clear, and I think that's about as much as the government can do. The People's Bank has announced a number of measures, but more and more liquidity in this stage doesn't really help the real economy. It's positive for the stock market, and we've seen that reaction. But it's still probably not, and it gives a little bit of confidence for households that hold stocks, but it's probably not enough to get more demand. So the fiscal measures are going to be very important in the short run, as well as in the medium run. And I found the announcement of the Politburo on September 24th was very important, where they talked about anti-cyclical fiscal policy. And that's not something that happens overnight. So in the short run, we're going to get some measures, and there's lots of speculation how big the fiscal package is going to be. I think one should be moderating one's expectations. But in the medium term, we'll get the reforms that will make much more automatic stabilizers in that fiscal policy. I think that's very important for China, and that will help growth in the medium term as well as in the short run.
Mm-hmm. Professor Zhu Ning, of course, before yesterday. I mean, Tuesday's press conference by the NDRC, National Commission of Reform and opening up. Obviously, they talked about. There's a lot of, let's say, high expectation out of that press conference, for fiscal policies. People were talking about, trillions of dollars, yuan at least, of investment of stimulus package. But then there's announcement of 200 billion yuan on major projects. So there's disappointment. You can see the stock market coming down. So do you see there's also a need probably to manage this expectation, or at the same time, we do need more fiscal policy support?
Yes, I think a stock market is all about expectation. So in that regard, I think I'm not too surprised by how the market was surprised by the materialization of the fiscal stimulus policy. That being said, I think there is growing consensus that I think China's economy at this juncture of time does need a very big dose of fiscal stimulus. So I think when and how much, I think that's debatable, but I think all people agree that we need a big dose of stimulus. In what form will those stimulus take place? Unfortunately, I think it is still a question of a lot of debate. There are still people who are big supporter of the traditional infrastructure investment, and also there are people who are more interested, myself included, in providing a better social welfare program such as medical health and social security. So I think it's a matter of time and how the stimulus will be implemented. I don't think that's the end of the stimulus. So I think, yes, it is needed for China's economy and for China's stock market to stabilize and rebound. And also, I think it's a matter of time and how it will take place in the near future.
So Michele, do you agree there's a need of fiscal stimulus package there? And in what area, in what way that should be implemented?
I think we still need to continue on the investment side, on the innovation, of course, because that's one of the key drivers of economic growth. But I also think that the importance of that element should very quickly go down. And I think I would push more, and I think it was mentioned earlier, is what I call it the silver bullet of the Chinese economy, which is free education, free healthcare, and the reforms of the pension system, because that and only that would unlock the 25% of saving rates the average Chinese household has. Of course, rich people save more, poor people save less, but this is really, in a way, something that the Chinese government could think of doing when they think the time is appropriate. But that would be really what could transform the balance of the structure of the Chinese economy, less on investment. We already have less on export, but we now need to push more on consumption. So you cannot increase consumption unless you will increase wages, which cannot grow too much. They grow at the GDP rate, but you also can unlock savings, and that would increase basically the consumption potential. If I may, on the stock market, I think it was a bit difficult, and I take the side of the NDRC to give details that the market was expecting after a 20% rise during the national holiday. So I think the NDRC did a good job at trying to explain things, but of course the market was ahead of the information that was given. Having said that, I think this retrenchment of the stock market yesterday and today could be the basis for what the market would expect on the conference call on Saturday, and turn all this process into more of a smooth realignment of the economic performance with the stock market performance. Because yes, the stock market anticipates, but sometimes anticipates too much, and the government kind of needs to feed, we call it the monster. They always wants more and more, but there needs to be something. Otherwise, the market gets a bit disappointed.
Yeah. Speak of that, Premier Li Qiang in a study session also on Tuesday, talked about basically urging the government departments to support growth improve policy coordination, and solve the outstanding problems. He also talked about specific plans for policies that are being studied, basically if they are ready, and then that will be mapped out. Professor Qian, at least we can all agree upon that is, the focus of the government or the entire government is the economy right now.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. Obviously, we are seeing serious moves. The other thing I think it's very important is, as we discussed, the central government is stressing that different departments should work together. So today there's another piece of important news that there was a working conference between the central bank and Ministry of Finance. And that's actually quite unusual because, again, we know that the fiscal policy and the monetary policy should work together. That's a very clear sign. The other thing I think when we see a lot of this news conferences is that the policymakers also try to guide expectation. I think a very good example is back on the 24th of September, Governor Pan Gongsheng, when he was introducing these new lending facilities to inject liquidity into the stock market, he said very clearly that depends on how this works, there could be a second round of another 500 billion. Mm-hmm. There could be also another round of this lending facility to help firms to buy back stocks. I think that's also important. So, people can always debate, are some of these coming a little bit too late? But I think on the positive side, especially for people like me and Professor Ning who've watched both the US government and the Chinese government, other governments around the world, when they announce and make policies, we do see that this time the Chinese government, especially from the different departments, clearly when they come out, talk to the press, they're in sync. And you see that there's a sequence of moves that's coming. So I think that's very positive.
Mm-hmm. So Professor Zhu Ning, obviously, coordination on the macro sense, and also the synergy effects. That's important. That's what the Chinese government is stressing. Can we say we are also, on Saturday with the finance ministry, obviously the minister himself will give a press conference. So again, there's a lot to expect for more specific policies, fiscal policies.
Yes and no. I think it is very clear that different agencies and the departments of the Chinese government are now working very closely towards the same shared view, an objective which is trying to stabilize and revitalize China's economic growth. So I think there's no disagreement in that. But I think in terms of the details and the implementations of the plans, I think, as Bert and Professor Qian mentioned earlier, I think some of the policies are supposed to be taking place right away, whereas some of the other policies are supposed to take a little bit longer to take place. So in a way, I think we're going to see the general direction of the traveling for economic policies, both for monetary and for fiscal. But I think some of the details, for example, there were rumors about giving the rebate to people who have 2 children. There have been rumors about giving incentive for people to replace their home appliances. I think those policies require far more fine-tuning, which means that they may not be able to be released all at once, unlike the monetary policies. In a way, I think I am positive we're going to see some very in-sync policy towards stabilizing and revitalizing the economy. But at the same time, to what extent are we going to see greater details or the immediate implementation of those policies? I think I remain a little bit uncertain.
Mm-hmm. Professor Hofman, if you look at some of the policies, I think we are seeing the effects, at least for short term. For example, we do have the latest number of the Chinese property market. In general, there's transactions of new homes jumped by 27% from a year earlier. And in some big cities, for example, in Shenzhen, there's new home sales jumped by tenfold. So that's very impressive. But still, and some people would say, there's a challenge. There's excess inventories. You have to solve that problem. We need more policies in that respect. Is that the case?
So I believe so. Look, it's very encouraging to hear that there's some effect now, and I think it's largely an expectations effect. So, but also largely in first tier cities. Shenzhen will have no problems in selling its housing with a little bit of relaxation on the criteria. And you've seen in large tier one cities that they have relaxed the criteria. A second important plank to increase demand is the household registration system. The third plenum has announced further reforms. If it becomes easier to move to cities, that will create extra demand for housing. The third, and that's the People's Bank measure, is the reduction in the mortgage rate. It's not enormous, but it helps a little bit for people to buy new homes. Those are very positive effects. On the fiscal side, I believe the immediate impact, if there is one, will really come from solving local government finances, because there's really lots of troubles in local governments. They've cut spending, they've cut salaries, and they are in arrears on their deliveries. That can be immediately released, and that is fast flowing cash, if you want. The second is the property market, and a policy that would give a bit more government support, for instance through social housing, can actually give immediate support for the property market, stabilize a bit more the property market, and that would have an effect on confidence and therefore consumption. So fiscal policy, yes, the reforms in the fiscal system will have long-term effects, and that is the new supertanker being built. But there are some short-term bullets that are going to be quite important as well.
Yeah, Professor Hofman, you mentioned about consumer confidence. Of course, confidence is one of the key words there. Business confidence, consumer confidence. For consumer confidence, there are debate. People say we need a cash handout to people, but the government had talked about handing out cash to this, let's say, low and middle class people who need help. Not on average, everybody will benefit from that. Is there any other way? I mean, besides increasing the wage, the salary, as Michele mentioned, this is a long-term issue. Improving people's living standard. How can you solve that kind of, let's say, increase the demand in the short term? Is there anything we can do?
Well, there are some immediate levers. The rural pension system, or the urban rural resident pension system, which very low benefits. That's an immediate lever where the central government could say, look, we want local governments to double it and we pay for it. That's an immediate effect, and it depends on how much money goes in there. Second, unemployment insurance for migrant workers. That could be a second element where you say that has a pretty immediate effect. Third is the shoring up of the pension system itself. And to give one example, I'm not saying that this is the only proposal around, but we know that the urban workers' pension system is running out of money by the mid of the next decade. If the government says, look, we're going to recapitalize the pension funds with an X amount right now, then people say, oh, well, actually, my pension is pretty solid there, so I can start spending. I feel a bit more confident. But I do believe, as you suggest, that in the short run, the property market is very important. And second, the labor market is very important. I do think a lot of Chinese citizens are currently struggling with having invested in their children a lot, in great education, and youth unemployment is up. So that immediate demand has to come up so that there are jobs being created. And unfortunately, the one sector that does really well in China is manufacturing, but it's very modern manufacturing, which does not create enough jobs for all of these educated people coming on the labor market. So there, a liberalization of the services sector, some changes in regulation on innovation, on internet, on finance, would actually boost the labor market, I think, in a meaningful way, and that would also feed into confidence.
Professor Zhu Ning, do you agree?
Yes, I think largely with Bert's proposition, I think at least in conceptually, I think I fully agree with Bert's point about, I think we have to provide more fiscal stimulus and more targeting at providing better social welfare and enhancing the human capital side of the economy. I was shaking head only because I think I was in line with Bert's comment, but I just think that it's very, very costly. So in a way that with the slowdown in the economy and with the a moderation in the housing market, I think it is a very good concept. I think I'm fully supportive of the idea, but I think it will not be easy to fully implement what Bert has said, even though I fully agree with Bert conceptually.
Professor Qian, you want to weigh in?
So, certainly, that's the main question of the debate, right? It's like how we allocate the money. I think most people agree that the way they should have the fiscal stimulus is the issue for the central government to issue all these super long-term bonds. I want to add one component that will simultaneously solve part of the local government debt problem and also boosting employment. If the goal is to boosting employment, which is very important for these households to consume more, in China, in the urban areas, the data is that 80% of the jobs were created by small and medium-sized enterprises. So some people propose this, and I'm in full support of this, is that part of the stimulus money can be used to pay off part of the local government debt that's owed to these SMEs. Mm-hmm. So a lot of firms, they have leverage problem, but other firms, they have good business. One of the problems they're cash poor is because they have so much accounts receivables, they can't collect the money, including money owed by the local governments. So if you could use part of the money, there are estimates on how much that's needed. The nice thing is that you restore confidence to these SMEs, which is very important, because you tell them now, look, what the local government owe you the money, we will take care of it. That should be a confidence booster. And the other thing is that I think this solves a lot of these problems for employment security. That's the point I want to add.
Yes. Michele, how do you look at these challenges? We have a series of challenges. Yes, property market, employment, local debt. You want to solve these problems, they are expensive. Professor Qian mentioned, it seems that this is a plan could solve basically all of the problem with one arrow. How do you look at that?
We need a holistic, comprehensive solution. So it's already a very good step and announcement that all ministers will work together to solve our problems, because it's not just about fiscal, labor, investment, it's about everything and how the system works. One thing I would say maybe to add, the real estate market is indeed important, but I see the importance in a slightly different way. I think it needs to be stabilized so that people do not see the value of their homes go down, and they feel confident that their savings, their life saving, is safe in their home. But I also don't think that the real estate should be anymore the engine of growth of the Chinese economy. It's kind of past, something from 10 years ago. We had one of the good things that the Chinese government does very well, better than almost any other government in the world, is to adapt policy to the economic stages of development. So we had in the 80s development in the urban areas, in the 90s we had development of Pudong and the urbanizations. Then we had the global financial crisis, development of high-speed network. Then we have real estate, of course, inherited from the 90s. Now we have technology moving. I think I want to see a Chinese economic model where in 10 years' time, real estate counts for very small proportion of GDP. So we get rid of this problem by making sure it is stable, priority, but then advancing new industries, because we cannot just push and rely on something which is, I wouldn't say a dead horse, but something that has exhausted its main engine of growth. And this is what Chinese government is very good at transforming the structure of its economy, more on services, more on development, and let survive with no major crashes the old industries.
Well, Professor Qian Jun, a World Bank economist says, stimulus measures of recent weeks were not a substitute for the deeper structural reforms needed to boost longer-term growth. So that what Michele mentioned about this structural reform, basically migrating from relying on the real estate sector to some other sectors for growth. Where are we now?
Certainly that's true, but AI obviously is important, but I think it is two ways. For the longer term growth, we do need new engines, and in some aspects, the Chinese economy, the Chinese firm have done reasonably well. EVs, batteries is one area. Obviously, there are some issues of that own industry in terms of how do they develop their global competitiveness. There is no doubt that in the short run, there needs to be a comprehensive package of both fiscal and monetary stimulus, because there's not enough domestic demand. A lot of households and firms need to deleverage, and real estate in the short run cannot be replaced by developing these new other industries. So ideally, as Bert and other speakers have mentioned, ideally we can use this round of stimulus to simultaneously solve the short-term problems and also guide the economy on its new path, on the path of sustainable growth. And that's why I think how and in what sequence do we roll out these fiscal stimulus is really the key. But on that note, I agree with Michele saying that the Chinese government, judging by the past 40 years of reform and opening, is indeed very good at this, that we can target two goals. We use all the resources of society, and we're going to get there. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we can do both.
Okay. Professor Zhu Ning, so, one stone with two birds. So stimulus packages for now to solve some of the challenges, and then also laying the foundation for long-term growth. Are you confident we are capable of doing that? At the same time, we will achieve 5%, around 5% economic growth for this year?
Yes, I think we are still in the game for catch up with the around the 5% growth target. And I think we want to be realistic about it. I think we shouldn't set a target to be back at 8% or so. I think around 5% for such a large economy, for this state of China's economy, is a very satisfactory growth target. So I think we're trying to achieve that. And earlier this year, during the two sessions, I think we set a target to be around 5%. So I think as long as we're in that neighborhood, I think we should be happy about it. And following up on what Jun said, I think there are two things which I'm really looking forward to. One is, going back to this theme about letting the market play the maximum force in allocating resources. And two is, providing better protection to entrepreneurs and private enterprises so that they can feel very comfortable and reassured in doing business in this increasingly difficult environment. So I think those two things have already been reflected in the press conference by NDRC. But if there is more implementation or progress, I think that'll be better for restoring the confidence and the economy.
Well, do you expect, immediate policies in terms of protecting the private sector, the businesses, as I mentioned in the NDRC press conference, upcoming conferences, economic conference in December or in March, the two sessions?
I think we're already seeing some from the Politburo meeting and from the third plenum. So I think, yes, I do look forward to more concrete policy measures to unfold all those policy orientations.
All right. With that, we conclude today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.